got the recording started. So, can everybody hear me? I'll take it out for a second. I'll put it back in. It's 2023, you guys. It's a new year. This is our first event of 2023, so thank you, Ken. So good evening and welcome to Roundabout Books. My name is Julie. I'm the events manager for the store. One thing I do want to ask our audience, by show of hands, how many of you are here for the first time? Thank you. Many people still tell us every day that they didn't know that we were over here, and we just celebrated 6 years. So we're really glad that more people are finding us every day, and for a variety of reasons. First, we do want to take this opportunity to acknowledge that our bookstore resides on the ancestral unceded land of the Confederate Tribes of Warm Springs. In our immediate area are also the unceded lands of the Confederate Tribes of Siletz Indians and the Tribes of Grand Ronde. We encourage everyone to learn more about the land you occupy and the story of its peoples. So since tonight is our first event of 2023, I wanted to thank everyone for making our new ticketing system work so well. This is our first time with Eventbrite and the $5 fee or the book purchase, which also helps our authors because the more books we sell, the more authors we can bring in, the more events that we can do. It's also our goal to continue to offer non-book events. So we're going to do more trivia. We're just going to do more things that are fun for our community. So here are some of our 2023 events to look forward to. Next Tuesday, January 17th, Josh Savage will present on the second edition of his book, 100 Things to Do in Bend, Oregon Before You Die. On January 24th, Portland journalist Josephine Willington will be here to talk about her debut book, Where We Call Home, Land, Seas, and Skies of the Pacific Northwest. And on January 26th, Bend resident Lauren Fleischman will be here to talk about her memoir, Good for a Girl, a woman running in a man's world. So if you have any questions about our events, those books are on the top shelf of our local section, and then more info can be found at our website, which is roundaboutbookshop.com. Now I'm so pleased to introduce Kathryn Mattingly and her new book, Katya. Kat has always had a passion for writing. A handful of her short fiction pieces have received recognition of excellence and are included in her short story collection, Fractured Hearts. Her literary suspense novels include Benjamin, Journey, Olivia's Ghost, and The Tutor. In addition to earning a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Oregon and a Master of Arts from Pacific U, Kat has studied writing under multiple New York Times bestselling authors. Her mentors have included Terry Brooks, Dorothy Allison, Elizabeth George, John Saul, and Gail Tsukiyama. She also teaches continuing ed at Central Oregon Community College, including novel writing, fiction and memoir, and the art of the short story. Kat is also a member of the Central Oregon Writers Guild, which is how I know her, and she's included in the anthology they just put out last December, so you can check out more of our local writers there as well. So I'm going to turn it over to her so she can talk about Katya.
I want to thank everybody for coming. It's exciting for me. I haven't done this in a while. I didn't do it with my last couple of books because we moved a lot. And so we had just moved, and so I didn't have a following or any reason to do this. So I'm excited. And I know a lot of you already haven't signed the book. I don't know if any of you have actually read it yet. I'm going to do a little excerpt from it. Let me tell you briefly what it's about. So on the back, which I think that my publisher says it a lot better than I could, so I'm just going to read it. It says here, Katya creates etchings and silkscreens from sketches drawn above a vineyard when not busy as a micro farmer growing produce behind her Napa home. Both are a distraction from her unhappy marriage. A series of unpredictable events turns her world upside down, landing her in a coma. While unconscious, Katya lives in an alternate state, which depicts her ideal life. If she can solve the meaning of what she dreamt while in a coma, it might reveal the answers to everything that matters. So this is what the book is about. I'm going to read just a couple pages from this chapter. They're headed to Newport, and they've just arrived. I won't tell you much more than that, but I will tell you that she's in her coma state. And in her coma state, she doesn't know what's going on because her mind is somewhere else, right? But it just feels so real to her. And mean, it's what you can't figure out. Is this a dream? Is this really happening? So we have that whole part of the book. That's about half of the book is her in the coma, her voice. Then we also have the surgeon's voice who's taking care of her. So that's the other voice in the book. So we go back and forth between what we'll call reality and maybe her reality or non-reality. We're not sure what it is until we get further in the book. So this is a little excerpt of her trying to figure out what in the heck's going on. We arrived by lunchtime and stopped at Moe's Chowder House. I didn't recall having been to Moe's with Parker and Ruby, but I did remember visiting the well-known restaurant a couple times a year growing up. My mother loved the ocean. It might have been the only thing we had in common. Fresh crab off the docks made her face light up like Christmas morning. She'd gather treasures along the shoreline and then sit in a lawn chair staring at the waves for hours. I'd play in the surf up to my knees, but any further would get me scolded. Neither of my parents were the adventurous type. For such strong, independent people, I thought them unusually fearful of the physical world. My father didn't like water, any kind of water. He did brave Lake Billy Chinook in a fishing boat, but that was as far as his courage went when it came to tackling the natural world around him. He lived in his books, in his music, when not stressing over business leisures. I could still hear him reciting poetry to me. I could still see his face take on a tranquil pose when listening to his favorite music, which ranged from Johann Bach to Willie Nelson. He was a huge Elvis fan. This is Elvis, king of rock and roll, he would tell me while playing his 33 RPM vinyl records louder than my mother preferred. We're here, Parker announced. Ruby wiggled out of her booster seat and jumped from the Land Rover with Goldie at her heels. I sat and studied the beach house from the vehicle. It was a good likeness to my etching hanging in Parker's den. The artwork couldn't quite capture how quaint the setting was, with the sun shining brightly on it. The house was the same color as driftwood, with white trim around the windows. A couple seagulls were perched on the roof, as if to greet us. Their gray feathers and white bellies blended right in with the house. I exited the car and cupped my hands over my eyes to look for Ruby, who was already running down the beach. At least she was a safe distance from the tide line. Goldie was prancing along right beside her. Parker had unlocked the door and was watching me from the generous front porch. He had a suitcase in each hand. "Are you coming, Rosie?" "What about Ruby? I don't think we should leave her alone on the beach." "I'll watch her." Parker set the suitcases just inside the door. "Go inside and see if any of it looks familiar." Without another word, he took off down the beach in the direction Rubes had gone with Goldie. The house was set back far enough to be safe from high tides during coastal storms. I looked skyward as if expecting one any minute. There were a few dark clouds in the distance. Maybe they'd continue to hover out at sea, or maybe they'd work their way here. It was impossible to tell. But storms were not uncommon this time of year. I was guessing we might get at least a shower. After entering the front room, I stood still for a moment, admiring the light, airy feel of the house. Sand-colored throw rugs were scattered across the dark wood floor. Curtains the color of the Pacific blew gently at the open windows. Vanilla-scented candles had been placed here and there with seashells scattered about their base. A well-used stone fireplace filled one corner of the living room with a wraparound leather couch the color of wet sand. There was a shiny black vase on the mantel. It reminded me of the large lava rocks just offshore. The vase held dried coastal flowers of every color of the rainbow. Whoever furnished the home didn't want you to feel separated from the beach outside the door. I put the suitcases in our master bedroom, which was small but cozy. There was a plush teal green comforter on the king-size bed and a generous window with an ocean view. I peeked into Ruby's room. It was cheerful and bright with blue and yellow seahorses on the curtains and bedspread. Before heading out to the beach, I unloaded everything from our cooler into the fridge. I nearly got lost in the expansive view of the dunes from the kitchen window. A light oak table with 6 chairs filled the nook area. Someone had set a glass vase filled with wild daisies in the middle of it. How can I not remember such a perfect beach house? On my way out the door, I hesitated at the bookcase beside it. Staring right at me was a copy of Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventure in Wonderland. The book had been on my mind a lot lately, and I was tempted to page through it, but decided I'd wait till after dinner. Dark clouds were moving closer, but the beach was calling to me like an old friend. I didn't have to walk far to find Parker and Rubes playing fetch with Goldie. They must have grabbed the frisbee from the car while I was in the house. I joined them for a while. We ran after the frisbee and laughed when falling in the sand. Soon Parker and I were worn out, leaving Ruby to play fetch alone with her furry companion. The two of us walked along the beach hand in hand, watching the busy clouds roll in. We should have felt a sense of urgency to retreat indoors before the imminent downpour, but none of us were inclined to do so. Parker took the trail to the bluff above us. I kept an eye on Ruby running along the edge of the surf. I didn't dare admit it even to myself, but I'd hoped a trip to the coast would clear my thinking and help me stabilize my condition. I wanted to believe a change of scenery, a place I loved to visit for solace and peace of mind, would give me exactly that. I needed the rhythm of the tide and the fresh ocean breezes to clear out the cobwebs in my head. I'd hoped my vision would stop fading in and out, and my hearing would no longer echo. That didn't happen. The echoing had been constant while on the beach, as were the blurred and faded images of sand and sea. Additionally, I now had seconds that lapsed into nothingness, as if I'd been momentarily removed from time altogether. I stood at the edge of the surf and watched the waves crash onto the jagged rocks. The sun had slipped away behind the dark clouds, which were directly overhead now. Rain soon spilled from the sky and soaked us all to the bone. Ruby was oblivious to the wet and cold. She jumped and laughed and skipped her way along the heavy rain-soaked sand with Goldie at her heels. I envied their light, carefree hearts. How many more moments did I have with them? Through the downpour, I watched Parker's shadowy figure up on the bluff. Was this day a memory I could keep? I could feel warm tears running down my cheeks and mixing with the cold rain. They were tears of joy, real or imagined. My time here with Parker and Ruby was nothing short of glorious. I watched the ocean gobble up the shore and then release it. I watched the cold shower in and the warm sun peek out. I watched Ruby splash barefoot in the waves and heard Goldie bark with delight. I saw the wet, glistening sand sparkle in the sun, where just a minute ago it had been ominous and dark. I felt the roaring wind turn into a kitten's breath and gently dry my tears. Whether real or imagined, this whole new life of mine was divine. So that's just a little excerpt. So, any questions about the book or anything else? Don't be shy.
What inspired your story?
You know, for all of my books, the plots just come to me. I don't know why. And then I just have fun thinking about them and building on that. And pretty soon I have to put it down on paper, kind of in a sort of not really an outline, but just sort of putting down my thoughts. And I don't know why these plots come to me. I don't get like a surplus of plots. The only plots that have come to me have been that books I've actually written. So I don't know. And I keep thinking after I finish a book, gosh, I don't know if there are any more plots that are going to come to me. But then a plot comes to me. So my next book has come to me. I'm starting to write down all my thoughts about that. And I don't know if that'll be my last book or not. We'll just have to wait and see. But for now, it's going to keep me really busy.
Publishing. What's the state of publishing right about now?
Well, for me, you know, I'm in sort of a little safe zone, a little safe pocket. I've been published in novel form since 2013, and I did have a New York agent. My first book, Benjamin, which I know some of you have read, it won an award at a conference, and so I got a New York agent, and then as a book, it won another award. But I had a couple friends. I had made a lot of friends going to Maui Writers. Once I started writing books, after my children were grown, and were off at college, I started writing, and then I got into the Maui Writer Group because we would go there on vacation, my husband and I, and I'd go to the conference, I'd go to the retreat, I worked under a different best-selling author every year, I got to bond with other writers, it was wonderful. And then my husband got to do all the things he loves to do, which had to do with the great outdoors, which I didn't really want to do. Then we'd come together for a few days and do things together. But anyway, a couple of the people in that group ended up getting published through New York. And, you know, they were so unhappy they didn't have any, they sold the rights to their book completely. They didn't have any say over the editing, they didn't have any say over the cover, they didn't have any say over anything. It just showed up one day, you know, in their mailbox. And, you know, if you don't sell well through New York in your first year, you're done, you know, and then where do you go from there? It's kind of all downhill, right? So I decided I didn't want to go that route. It may have been a silly decision, but I've been pretty happy. I was getting a lot of short stories published, and I was getting to know some local publishers. You know, back in 2013, no one knew what was going to happen with publishing because, you know, the internet was starting to come into play. People were starting to get self-published. Everybody was like scrambling around and repositioning themselves. And I was working at a small publishing house as their senior editor, editing, because I taught writing and English and things at a liberal arts college, and so I kind of had one of my faculty started her own little publishing boutique thing and asked me if I'd do that. So I did that, and part of that was she had a print magazine. Back in the day, everybody had a print magazine. Now you're hard pressed to do that. It's expensive. She wanted me to write for it every month something, and I said, well, I'll do book reviews because I love to read, right? So I noticed the new books, I would get I was able to get books just coming out, like before they were actually out. And I kept noticing that the books I loved were with Winter Goose Publishing. Didn't know anything about them. They're just a trade publisher. They were kind of small and new then. And you know, they loved that I was giving them all this notoriety in this print magazine. So, you know, their new books were selling. And so we sort of started this kind of relationship through email. And then I said one day, by the way, I also write books. Which, you know, I'm sure that's like, they don't want to hear that, right? They're like, oh no, another person. And they're like, well, we don't take unagented work. And I said, well, I had a New York agent and I decided I didn't want to go that route. I'm not going to get another agent, but this book did win an award. This manuscript won an award. And they're like, okay, send it to us. So I sent it to them, and I didn't hear anything, you know, and it was a couple months, and then I had the nerve to email them again, and I said, you know, have you read the book? Can we get together and talk about it? And they're like, well, we'd love to talk about it. I mean, do you live anywhere near? I'm like, oh, I'm only like, you know, 40 minutes away. It's actually 4 hours away. So we met for lunch, and long lunch, and the lady that I met with, we had so much in common. We talked about editing and teaching and books and publishing. It was wonderful, but we never brought up Benjamin. So right at the end, I decided in my head, thinking while I'm talking to her, you know, whatever you can tell me, whatever your editors can tell me that will help me raise this manuscript to a level that is publishable, I would just really love that information. And she said, oh, your book, our editor-in-chief absolutely loved it, and we would like first write a refusal on all of your books. And we'll give you this, you know, amount of money, and we'd like to publish it. Like, practically fell out of my seat. Alrighty then. So I think iPhones were kind of new back then. I went out in the car, and I sat in the car, and I texted everyone I ever knew, or I think I called them actually on the phone and said, I'm going to be published. And they're like, oh, that's great. So anyway, I've had a wonderful relationship with them. I sell well with them. I think maybe because I had a publicist with that first book, and she got me out there all over the place. So I have a following kind of out there all over the place. I had a really good job then. It paid really well. I could afford a good publicist. That job went away with the little recession we had in California. And so I have not had a publicist since then, but I'm still selling well. And I have recommended a few excellent writers who have finished their books to Winter Goose. And you know, some of them have been successful with that publisher and some of them haven't. And I really think when you go with a mid-sized publisher, and my little mid-sized publisher is really growing now. So they are now on the New York agents lists of, you know, publishers that they also solicit to. So they've grown, but they're very conservative. And you know, not everybody's going to sell well with them. It just depends on what kind of following you can build for yourself. I think is what makes the difference. But I've been very happy with them, and they have been wonderful to me. So, and they're very literary. They have a lot of poets. They have a lot of award-winning poets. You know, my books are pretty literary. They're just little suspense novels. I think it's kind of interesting that they're calling this one a psychological suspense, and I'm like, whoa, I guess I'm moving up in the world. Some of them they call romantic suspense. There's always some kind of suspense, you know. Anyway, that was a long answer. I'm sorry, I teach, so I talk a lot. Anybody have any other questions?
Yeah, for a small publishing company or growing like this one, when you come up with a new book and you're a known author, how many copies do they do a printing of on the initial?
You know, I don't know. I just order books. I order my books directly from them because I have found that because I think one reason they're successful and they've grown so much, they're careful with their money. So, you know, when they want to ship to bookstores, they're charging the bookstore for shipping and insurance, and bookstores don't like that. So I learned early on that, and they'll put the books anywhere I want them, but I only want them where I live usually, you know, unless it's relatives wanting them at a bookstore. So I take care of that, because that way I don't charge the bookstore for shipping and handling, and everybody's happy, you know, and that cuts into my profit. I don't care. You're going to find most writers don't write for the money. If they get money, they're like, oh, wow, I got a check. So I do get a royalty check 3 times a year, and it's a really fun to get, kind of live on it, but it's a decent supplement, I will say. You know, I will, you know, I think you have to be a New York Times bestselling author to live on your writing. This is what all my friends that are published have decided. Any other questions?
What's your most enjoyable part of writing a book and your least enjoyable part of writing?
Well, I tell my students, writing is rewriting. If you don't like rewriting, you're in the wrong field. Because you can put it all down on paper, but then you've got to redo it, and redo it, and redo it, and redo it, and rework it. I love all of that. I just love that whole entire process. My least favorite part is once it's gone to the publisher and the editor-in-chief has his own opinion about things, you know, and then we have to discuss what way we're going on this or that. I will say that was more of a problem with the first couple of books. Now there's hardly anything. He's moving my commas around, pretty much. Although he always has a few things, you know, like this time he's like, you know, we love you, but we're not going to pay for Beatles lyrics because that costs a lot of money. So the lyrics are coming out. And I'm like, okay, I get it. It's fine, you know. And a few other little things, you know. He will tell me, you realize you've used this word like 10 times already. You know, it's usually a funky word that I just got a hold of, you know. And I'm like, I didn't realize that, you know. And then I'll take out 9 of them or something, you know. But that, not too much. We don't really quibble about. I'm not up at 3 a.m. worried about the edits anymore. But that was my least favorite part.
So I get the part with the edits, but as you're writing, do you send your book to somebody to read and then they give you feedback on?
I do. That's very important. So for me, I always have 1 or 2. Back in the day, I used to have a little group of people that I'd sent it to, and then I decided if you find just the right person, you don't really need more than 1 person if they're the right person, right? And so my right person for this book is sitting right back there. Raise your hand, Yunte. So she was my person for this book, and she did a fantastic job. Her feedback was really wonderful for me. It was perfect for me. So, and then, you know, once I'm done with that, that whole process, then you do send it out. You know, most people do beta readers, but I do have my own people that will be completely honest with me, brutally honest with me. So instead of going to beta readers, I send it to them, and they're people that I look up to and admire, and you know, so that's how I do it. Any other questions?
So how do you decide on which voices you're going to use?
You know, it's a process. My first book was first person, 1 voice. And then my second book, I thought, oh, let's try third person limited, see what that's like. So that's kind of how I made that decision. Then my third book, I think I went back to first person again. Then I started getting more complicated. So this was the first time, you know, you have to keep it interesting for yourself, right? So this book, I decided to do 2 first-person voices, just because I wanted to try it, you know. And then and one's a man, so that was fun, getting in a guy's head. Hope I did a good job. You have to let me know. And he's a doctor too, so I'm like, you know, this is what I think you should be thinking. So, and then this next book is going to also be 2 voices, but they're going to be 3rd-person limited, because I've never done that, 2 first-person limited voices, and one is going to be an adolescent boy. So I've known a lot of those in my day. I've had a couple grandsons around, so I think I can do that, you know, but it's going to be a challenge, because I want to be authentic, you know. And I do know enough doctors, on, you know, like on a friend level, that I think I got the voice okay for him in here, or they would have told me, you know, hopefully. So that's how I do it. It's just like, oh, let's try this. You know, like, you just always want to kind of up your game, right? So that's what I do.
Do you use a lot of real life experiences? Like, did you go to Newport as a child? I mean,
Yes,
adult,
absolutely.
Do you have to do that kind of in your...
I mean, I try to be, well, I am very authentic, you know, so, and I will send it to people if I'm not sure. So I only write about places I have lived or traveled. Part of that's laziness. I don't want to do a lot of research. But then I still do research. Like, I mostly read historical fiction. I love historical fiction. But, you know, I don't really enjoy research, and that's a very large component of that. So I do always, I'm very authentic to where I've lived or traveled, and I've been fortunate enough to live and travel enough to be able to get to this point, you know. I did kind of run out of places, though, so I told my husband, you know, I think I'm going to have to go to France. He's like, boy, why do you gotta go to France? I'm like, well, because I think I need to write, my next book needs to take place, you know, in France. I think I'm gonna use Vail, Colorado, because I visit my daughter all the time, and she's lived there for a decade, so I know, kind of borrowing from her life at this point, and what she does there. And I said, but I need another location, so I think I'm gonna have to go to France. And he's like, funny how that just, you know, that's just how it needs to be, so I guess you'll need to go. So I did, so that worked out great. Yeah,
Business expense.
there you go. Yeah, and I took copious notes, so yay. And pictures, a lot of pictures. You know, I write down all these French words, so I have a whole library of pictures that I took for that one. Because, you know, it's not like you can just say, oh, let's go to the coast for the weekend. I mean, it's a long way to go if I get something wrong, right? Any other questions? Anybody out here thinking of writing a book? Yay. You are writing an amazing book. And MJ just finished one. So I love teaching novel writing. I love mentoring new writers. I wish I would have had somebody in my life, you know, kind of locally that I could have just bounced things off of back in the day. And so I really enjoy doing that. And so my class in Redmond, at the Redmond campus, starts next Tuesday. So if you know anybody who wants to write a book, it's a great place to bond with other writers and just learn a few tricks of the trade and just get more comfortable in your own skin and think about what it is you want to write, or if you're stuck in your book, you know, where to go from there. The one thing I don't want to forget to say is that Amazon does so much for us if we have a lot of reviews. So my readership doesn't especially review. Most of my readers buy actual books. They don't do downloads. It's a lot harder to get a review on a written book because, you know, those little stars don't pop up at the end of the download, right? So if you do read my book, I would really appreciate a review. And I read every review, and I try to figure out the Amazon name. Not everybody goes by their name on Amazon, but I can usually figure out who it's from. And I'm telling you what, I really have strong affection for the people that bother to write reviews for me. So I appreciate that.
Well, one thing I'll say about that too is you can also use Goodreads. So if you're not a fan of that other place, you can use Goodreads. But also, if you read a book, including hers, and you loved it, come tell us. Because we love to hear that from customers, because obviously we can't read every single book that's in here. And I've had some really great reviews from people of books that I never would have picked up myself. So it's really helpful to tell your local bookstore what you're reading. On that note, can you tell us your 3 favorite books of last year that you read?
My 3 favorite books of last year. I read Joyce Maynard's The Good Daughters. Absolutely love that book. I read the Marriage of Opposites by Alice Hoffman. I know that's been out a while, but I don't read things when they first come out. And let's see, what would the third one be? I have a cheat sheet here. Let me look. It's full of books. Like, I read prolifically. If you're writing, you have to read prolifically. That's just really important. Paris Never Leaves You by Ellen Feldman. Has anybody here read that book? Oh, I love that book. That was one of those books where, you know, when it was over and done, and I turned the page, and I'm like, wait a minute, it can't be over. That's not possible. But it was. I mean, you know, she had kind of one of those open-ended things going on. But mainly, I just loved the characters so much. I wanted to keep reading what was going to happen. That's when you know it's a good book. Some of my all-time favorite authors, Kristen Hanna. Do you guys read? I mean, I haven't read all of her books, but I really love The Great Alone. That one kept me up at 3 a.m. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But for weeks after I finished that book, I was still worried about that Williams accident. That's good writing. And I really loved The Nightingale. That was a really very fun book. Yeah. Yeah. So those are some of my all-time favorites. The Goldfinch by John Tart. I know some people thought it got a little mumble jumble in the middle there, but I loved it all. Every single word. No problem with that. And she won a Pulitzer, so a lot of people agreed with me on that one. Those are some of my all-time favorites. There's a long list. But those are my favorites.
Do we have any more questions?
Good question. So many readers now they don't want to read actual books. So many folks are going to the libraries or doing digital reading online. Do you get involved in that, or how does
Get involved in
like providing libraries with either your physical book or like Living now is the Shoes library?
the libraries. We're talking about libraries.
Libraries, yes.
Okay. Somebody told me I need to take my books to the library. I don't really know how that works. She
I know
does.
a little bit. So it's a lot about the publisher. With digital, like with Overdrive, the last thing that I heard this could have changed is libraries actually have to pay pennies per download. So they don't actually buy it. They have to pay every time you download it. And so that's an unfortunate thing because a lot of libraries can't afford that. So it's an unfortunate disconnect with publishers. What I have heard is that if you go in and request the book, like put a hold on it, they will order it from the publisher.
So physical book.
Yeah. The digital thing I don't know a whole lot about how to get it, but it's the same with audiobooks. They actually have to continue paying for them, which is not great. I don't love that because it almost penalizes libraries in a sense. When they buy that physical copy, they own it forever, and that's why you can buy it for $1 from friends from the library when it's served its purpose. The digital is kind of strange. I worked for a publisher in Portland that had figured out if we requested the book from Multnomah, they would order a copy.
Good to know.
So that may or may not be true, but try it. You never know. Because with your publisher, I mean, that's just it. With an actual publisher, while they may not be distributing to all bookstores, they're probably going to distribute to a library because that's still going to get them eyes on their product in that sense. Yeah.
Probably, yes. I would think my publisher would.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my publisher is very, I love that they're, I don't know what is the right word, elegant comes to me, but, I mean, there's things like, I'm like, why can't we put my email address on the back of the book or something, or, so people can contact me, like, no, that's really gauche, we don't do that. They're just really like, a little bit highbrow with a lot of what they do. I can't think of the right word for it, but I do love it. I love it. They're very artsy and they're that way, like that.
Well, I know quite a few of you bought the book beforehand, so if you need to pick it up from the counter, please let us know. If you haven't, those are the books for sale, and obviously Kat will be signing them. We have one more copy of Fractured Hearts on the shelf. If you are looking for a copy of her previous books, we can special order it, and then she's going to get copies and bring it to us. So
I do have
basically
one.
reserve one. Yes, they bought the other ones.
They sold them all out, so I'm bringing them more.
Yes.
So,
So
and
otherwise,
I know, and I love this community. I mean, we do live up at Eagle Crest, but I love Ben so much. It's been quite a bit of time here, and it's such a supportive community, and I love that about it. And it's the first time I've been near a supportive community like this, in a few years. So I'm really enjoying it.
well, thank you everybody for being here. Let's